How's it going, guys? Today, we figured we would do a bit of a segment on the journey of entrepreneurship, the start of Pride Roofing and Construction, some of the trials, tribulations, things that have been massive turning points. Just kind of dig down deeper into the story of the company as well as the owner. And I have him here today with me. His name is Christian Griffith. And I figured I would kind of go into the inspirational story of the company, the people involved in the company, how the company started, who Christian is as a person, to give you guys, the audience, kind of a better view into the company so that we don't just look like somebody going out doing some restoration on your house, but a more likable and relatable group of people to give you a sense of comfort when dealing with your project. So, like I said, I've got Christian Griffith here with me today, the owner of Pride Roofing and Construction. So I'm going to start out with a few questions, but why don't you introduce yourself and go from there?
All right. So, yeah, as Ryan said, I'm Christian Griffith, owner of Pride Roofing and Construction. Long walks on the beach and just kidding. I'm sure you'll ask a number of questions, so I'll go into too much detail, but we're coming up on our 5th birthday as an organization. We thought it would be useful to talk about, like you said, trials and tribulations, learn about the true dedication and experience, dedication and leading to the experience that it's been to build this business. It has been an absolute whirlwind. We've been very successful and we're very blessed to be where we're sitting right now. But it didn't come without, extreme points of pain and a lot of really hard things to get past. We thought we'd identify some of those things, some of the learning curves that we've had to adapt to, and just give you a different approach.
So before we go too deep into the dark and despair of the negative and points of pain, why don't you just give us a little bit of history about who you are, where you came from, what gave you the drive and motivation to succeed, even though things are very challenging at times, and just give us a little bit of background on you.
Sure. So, I guess I'll preface my response with, I kind of figured I would be. This is probably one of the last positions I would have ever thought that I'd be in, growing up, and just in my career projection, or at least what I thought was my career projection growing up. So, I grew up as one of 4, so big family of siblings, and I was the 3rd child. And as any 3rd child knows, you're a bit of a shadow, and understanding that sometimes people adapt differently. And I can tell you one thing that I did, instead of being out there looking for, attention and just doing anything I can to have the eyes on me. What I ended up doing was I kind of committed to a life of becoming extremely independent and sovereign, and I think that's played a lot into my growth. So grew up child of a big family. There's other things that have led to my personality for sure. My parents split up when I was in 8th grade. This is a real key and pivotal time in a young adolescent's life, especially boys. Didn't see my father for a significant amount of time. So a lot of the things we talk about in Pride all the time is the care and consideration that we give to our clients, and a lot of that really originates from my experience watching my mom, struggle as a single mother for a while. She ended up getting remarried, but there's a lot of things that we learned in my childhood that also, ring inside the halls and at work all the time, Lived in a home, with all of us kids, and my mom raising us, struggling to survive, and it was an interesting time for sure. It was very pivotal in my growth as a human. It goes without saying, you grow up in a house full of 4 children. There's a lot of competition that's bred there, so that also bleeds into some of my personality and a lot of the reason that we are sitting in this room, in this building that we work out of all the time. So that's early childhood. If you want to know more about my experiences, like I said, I'm probably the last person that I would have ever thought to sit in the chair that I sit in construction specifically. Growing up, I as a four-sport athlete, I focused all my time and attention on two things: school. Like I said, I became very independent, and with part of that was I had to be the best at everything. I graduated high school with a 4-point plus GPA. Fortunately, I was only second in my class, which still kind of burns me. Competition's coming out, but fortunately, the guy that beat me was one of my very good friends as well. I don't know how to summarize my life too well, but I'll just go over some of it, I guess. So, sports in school were really where my focus was. I put all of my energy and attention into those. Actually, one of my points of personal pride I don't talk about a whole lot is that I received every athletic and academic scholarship that my high school offered as one of 120 students. Sucks for everybody else, but it's great for me.
A little bit of that competitive nature.
Yeah. So as and I kind of think that I was like I think response to the divorce and just the way I was as an independent person, it kind of it made me not want to stand out in a way that was like, hey, look at me, shiny, flashy, loud, that type of stuff. But it made me want to make sure nobody, ever had to worry about me. So I think that's where a lot of the competitiveness and, the focus on school and all that stuff really played a part for me. I ended up choosing, maybe this is part of the reason we call the company Pride, but I chose wrestling as my sport in college. I wrestled for 4 of the 5 years that I went up there. I did a super senior lap, which is fun. I had a lot of fun in college, but I chose the sport of wrestling because a family member of mine told me he did not feel that I had the wherewithal or the work ethic to be a wrestler. So I decided to turn down my scholarship, turn down my, it wasn't a scholarship for football directly from the school, but I had the ability to walk on, so a clear walk-on route. And I decided to wrestle. So, wrestling was a part of life for me, always growing up, but it wasn't my number one sport. I wanted to play football, and I wanted to be a doctor. Those are the things I try to do, and it doesn't make a lot of sense that I run a roofing and exterior construction company. I don't want to be a doctor, but I guess maybe some of the story will play that out a little bit. But I ended up going to school for Western State College up in Gunnison, Colorado. It's called Western State Colorado University now. They've renamed it, but either way, it's a D2 school. But I really like the wrestling program there. It's a really it's an interesting place to wrestle. It's the highest collegiate wrestling room in America. That being said, wrestling, if you know anything about it, is one of the hardest sports on the planet. So,
highest in elevation.
Highest in elevation. So, hardest sport in the world in the hardest place to practice the sport in the world, which is not in the world, in the nation. I think there's other places.
Seems like some congruency to choosing that path in lots of different ways.
I've sort of always chose the hardest route you could go, for sure. So I wrestled for 4 years, like I said, of 5, and I ended up my academic route. I stayed as close to that A average as humanly possible. There were a couple of college classes that got me, so I ended up with a 3.8 something GPA, but I did end up with 2 majors. I have degrees in, it's in biology and psychology, but the emphasis are cell biology and biopsychology, which essentially means I know a lot about the cellular organism, the cell, or an organism at the cellular level. I also know the physiology behind behavior. I think that's basically the only thing that I actually use now, because a lot of my job is to deal with people, employees and salespeople. So that's about the only thing from my my academic endeavors that still sits with me. But and to make it even crazier, I ended up changing my path from wanting to become a doctor to wanting to become a dentist. I had an advisor who told me my personality and my general knack for understanding business in some of the classes that I was participating in and stuff like that. Made more sense to have my own practice. So I ventured towards dentistry, of all things. I ended up actually getting into dental school, and I think my mom still holds it against me that I turned it down. And this is the wildest part. I turned it down to work in the gym.
Right.
I was hanging out with meatheads all day long, and I loved my job, and I ended up really excelling in that career. So I stayed in the fitness world for about, I think it's 6.5, 7 years, something like that, prior to starting in, exterior construction. So like I said, I'm about the last person that should be sitting in the chair, or at least in my mind. Got that imposter syndrome pretty regularly. But I've learned how to develop the craft of, recruiting the right people to fill in the holes that I don't have personally. So I look at myself more like a head coach around here. And that's some of the path that got me there, I guess.
Yeah, there's some odd transparencies between, or I should say it's similarities between a large group of people here and the direct correlation to self-sought-out fitness, right? Which I think is, in my opinion, a direct correlator to work ethic, drive, self-motivation, etc. But it is kind of a group of a bunch of guys and women that like to go to the gym and hang out in the gym, right?
Yeah, we've had a lot of interesting comments about it over time.
Yeah.
Especially when we first started. Every single person that we recruited to work in the first year to 2 years was people who I worked with in the gym that we pulled out of fitness and brought them into construction.
Right.
So, yeah, our suppliers even would joke with us. They're like, "Do you have to be a bodybuilder to get a job there?"
Yeah, I had an interaction yesterday that was very similar. That kind of correlates to that imposter syndrome of. I was talking to a homeowner about what my background is in, and they were like, "So what the hell are you doing selling construction?" And the best answer I usually have for people is, "This is the avenue that I was given, so this is the avenue I took," right? Yeah. But going into, I know that you have an intensive background in sales and growing companies and growing businesses, but what kind of started or inspired you to dive into roofing and the restoration world? It's a very indirect correlation of biology, health, wellness, fitness, dental school, medical school, and then construction, which probably couldn't be more polarizing.
Yeah, it's hard to answer that question because it sounds dumb coming out of my mouth. But no, I guess two things really led to it. So in my time in the fitness industry, I had grown to the highest position that I was going to get to within two very large corporate big box gym chains, right? With the first one, I learned the art of sales. I learned the art of communicating. And if you know anything about working in a gym, you know that the only thing that actually makes you any money is to be one of the salespeople. You have to have a bleeding heart to be a trainer. I do have training certifications. I did that. But the people who are actually the ones that make enough money to live in that world for a long period of time are the salespeople. And that was what I grew into. And I was very fortunate at the first one, as I worked directly with the owner of the company as my mentor. I still hold him as a very near and dear to my heart. We've grown a little bit more distant, in communication than we were up through the last 2 years. But regardless, I fell in love with sales watching him do it in front of me. It was like he was a Jedi. It was the most interesting thing I've ever seen. I mean, I have this funny story. It's probably more than most people are going to want to watch, but I'm going to just lay it out there for you. His name is Nolan. And I had done a stint while I was trying to get into dental school, doing the professional interviews and stuff. And if you know anything about professional school, it takes a year. So if you don't get in, you have to wait another year, do the exact same process over again, submit all your scores, do a blah, 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 all that nonsense. And I was working in an oil field job just to kind of have a job, right directly out of college. And anyways, I decided that wasn't for me, and I started looking elsewhere. And I thought, hey, it'd be fun to work in a gym for a little while until I got into dental school. And so I interviewed with a guy, but what was funny about it was I showed up to the interview, and it was at a grocery store in the town that I actually grew up in Greeley, Colorado. Is a grocery store called Tottie's Grocery Store, and there was no gym there. He gave me the address. I showed up. I find out it's a grocery store. I find out there's no real gym there, and I find out that this building has been vacant for 10 years maybe. There's hobo trash everywhere. You know, the door was open, stuff everywhere, so on and so forth, dark, you know, gutted. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? Anyways, this guy in a Charger, in the middle of a snowstorm, you know, a rear-wheel drive Charger comes fishtailing around this parking lot, pops out of a car. You know, it's snowing outside. There's no sunlight. He's got sunglasses on and a ponytail, and I'm like, what in the hell's going on? And within 15 minutes, this guy literally painted me a picture of what this gym was going to be and how cool it was going to be, and he had me sold enough to change my entire career path to work in the gym industry. And I went and, you know, shadowed him for a couple of weeks, watched him sell in action, and it was interesting. The guy literally could talk to people, and within 30 seconds, there's like as if they were best friends. And he could convince them that this gym was just as cool as he convinced me to make it sound. And I just had to learn. I just had to understand exactly what was going on. And so I know this is a long-winded response to your question, but learning the art of sales in the gym industry, you have, you know, there's thousands of people that walk in and out of the gym, which means you have thousands of opportunities to practice your craft. And with my job, I mentioned that I scaled the ladder. I worked as the general manager, the regional manager, the corporate manager. I worked as their VP of sales, and I also worked a side role simultaneously to that where they had me stand in as the general contractor's side-by-side guy. I helped him plan his subcontractors to build the gyms. We turned it from one gym that was open into 36 gyms nationwide. Over the course of, or not, it was supposed to be 36 gyms. We never actually opened all of them because they had some issues internally. He picked a poor business partner, so some correlation. But anyways, long story short, I learned construction management through that. I learned the art of sales. I learned just everything that is necessary to communicate with people effectively. And then on top of that, my previous business partner, so I said there's two reasons. My previous business partner, I met in that gym. He was working prior to that as a roof installer for a very large commercial roofing company and decided he needed a break. So he picked up a job as an overnight, gym manager and talked them into letting him become a personal training manager. And he became historically, he was the highest volume salesperson in personal training sales that the company had ever seen. He's just a naturally good salesperson. I met him there. He left for 3 years or so, but for those entire 3 years, he pestered the absolute shit out of me to come and do what he was doing. He left to go sell roofing, right? We knew between the two of us there was enough business acumen, enough communication skills, enough sales, that kind of stuff that we could sell the product. And he also had all of the technical savvy to know how to install it. Mm-hmm. So we built the organization together, but long story short, I let myself be talked into doing this. Yep. And there's no real correlation other than I love communication. And I get to communicate with people every single day, employees and customers alike.
Well, I think that there's there's an element of the high volume gym sales where you lose a little bit of the element of personal investment, mm-hmm. right? So you're trying to sell as many people as possible at this membership rate and or this personal training rate, and the end goal of those corporate structures is volume, right? So there's, I would imagine that over the course of your tenure at those companies, you had hundreds or thousands of people start, and probably hundreds of thousands of people that you never saw again.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
sometimes you only met them once.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the way that the fitness world goes.
I had with my experience in the fitness industry is kind of the opposite of that. I was more boutique, high end, tons of investment, tons of development with the people personally, and I'm fortunate enough that I got to meet the CEO and owner of Planet Fitness, and he trains his salespeople to get credit card information. Right? He's like, just get as many people's credit card information as you can and set them up on EFT, right? And they bank on the fact that I forget what the metric is for Planet Fitness, but it's something like 93% of the people never go.
If you look further into those facts, because we were in a similar model gym concept, HVLP, high volume, low price point, or high value, low price point. Anyways, they bank on people's weaknesses.
Right.
Absolutely. It goes very deep and dark into that with Planet Fitness. The reason they give you pizza once a week is because generally the average person's not going to cancel their membership, because they allot the $10 a month as a food expense instead of a lifestyle expense.
Right.
So pretty wild stuff.
Yeah. So you start this, business, Pride, with that previous partner at a Longmont, right? And out of a garage.
Sort of.
Yeah.
We set the business up as a Longmont company, but what we did was we operated a north and south location. All the filings were out of Longmont, so that's where it looked like we were from. That was his house. My house was in Wellington, Colorado. Pretty big distance between the two of them, but if we were working north, I housed the inventory in my garage, built the projects, I ran them, did all that good stuff. If we were working south, we were out of there. So I actually still have pictures of, me and him when we were still, drafting the logo, sitting in my garage on 3 or 4 bundles of shingles under your butt and 7 or 8 bundles of shingles as your desk and computers on top of it. Yeah. Stuff like that, so. Yeah.
Well, I think that's, when I started my first business, it was very similar. I started with and I still have them. I'll never get rid of them for nostalgia reasons, but a 12-pound pink kettlebell and a jump rope, right? And the pink kettlebell is now in my daughter's room. But, that was what started my journey, I guess you could say, into the 12, 13 years that I ran and operated gyms. But I think the point that a lot of people starting business, the fear of jumping or the fear of leaving where they are and jumping into something new, a lot of the times the apprehension is, well, I don't have the money, right? Or I don't have the resources or the assets or the relationships or the customers, whatever it may be. I think there's a direct correlation to the perseverance, work ethic, and drive that you were taught in wrestling, that you kind of taught yourself in the third of 4 kids and doing everything you could to stand out. Maybe a little bit of perfectionism in there.
Teens to OCD.
Yeah, and but I think that in the discussion of entrepreneurship, especially in this country, I think that that's what honestly makes this country what it is. I think it's the entire backbone of this country, is the ability for us to make a decision and then do what we need to do from a grassroots way to start something, that in 5 years has generated well over 8 figures, has provided, meals for families, financial consistency for many families. The burden, I guess you could say it's a burden. I looked at it as a blessing, but the burden of the stress of it, I guess you could say, was at the time when I had the most amount of employees was also the time that I felt the most responsible for everybody that was under me. And there were times that I wished that I could go back to when it was just me, right? And I had all controllability, right? There was less risk because the only person taking the risk is me. And but you have a sense of obligation and maybe even a slight sense of ownership with these people's well-being. But I think that, that picture that all of us can picture in our mind, you sitting on a bunch of stacks of shingles working on your computer. I mean, and that was what, 2018? Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, that's a pretty big testament of what earnest work ethic can give you, and, operating ethically and with the customer's interest at the forefront of what we're trying to do, which is the reason why, I bring that up with the gym thing, is because it's kind of inverse, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, let me go from the most amount of customers I can get with a little amount of care to let me take care of the few customers we have to the point where they start referring us to everybody, mm-hmm. right? So what do you think the biggest, I would say, the first 2 years, we'll say 2-3 years, what are the biggest hurdles that you faced? How'd you guys overcome them?
First 2 years. So, what's interesting is I've been able to kind of reflect at the end of each of the years, coming up to the 5th year reflection, I guess. But it's interesting the different levels of pressure that come every single year. In the first 2 years, the biggest hurdle to get around, I think, was specifically convincing friends and family members, i.e. the gym friends that I had and a couple of family members that jumped in, was convincing them that it would support them enough to jump off the cliff themselves. That was really difficult. You don't have any reputation whatsoever. And if you know anything about the roofing world in Colorado, and the amount of hail that hits here and that kind of stuff, it's an extremely saturated market. So although there's bountiful amounts of opportunity, there's also an exorbitant amount of people who are going after that opportunity. And so it's if you have no credibility whatsoever other than what you're telling somebody and hoping they trust you, and you don't have any support outside of yourself. That was the first year's biggest struggle. I'm positive of that. With the sales experience that I have, and that Chris had at the time, it was something we were willing to jump into. And you mentioned that in the last comment. It's a testament to just like that American dream. It's like we were just too young, semi-stupid, but also very intelligent humans. You have to have a little sense of like, I just got to do this and hope for the best, But we were confident enough in our skills, and good enough with our salesmanship and communication to be able to convince homeowners and other salespeople alike to come and try this out with us. Right. That was the biggest hurdle in that year. Moving into year 2, I'd say that the biggest hurdle that year was taking on a exorbitant amount of overhead. So we had a lot of success in our first year. And with that success, and this is what we've done every single year since the culmination, so whatever profit there was, it was reinvested into growth. Right? It's a common concept with entrepreneurs, but every single penny that we had was dumped into marketing, dumped into advertising, dumped into recruiting, and dumped into overhead. with Chris, yes, absolutely. It was more than we should have, and that was that was one of the biggest biggest heartaches or hurdles or whatever you want to call it. Is we now were responsible for other people. We had an operational agreement with these other people because in our first year, everything was 1099. This is the way a lot of people do this in the industry. We were 1099 ourselves. We literally didn't even employ ourselves. We just paid ourselves percentages of profit as necessary to keep our bills paid. And everything was outsourced. Our labor was outsourced. Our invoicing was outsourced. Even our office management was outsourced to people that we knew and people that were good at collecting money or good at answering phones or whatever. And so going into the next year, we found that it was going to be absolutely impossible to even meet the next stepping stone in the development of the business if we didn't have any forecastability. If we didn't have any way to predict our sales and our volume, because we can't manage people that, if you know employee tax, or not employee, but just employee law and those
Right.
types of things, you can't tell a 1099 person what to do. You can't tell them to show up here, and you can't even tell them how to show up there and what they should look like, because you're infringing on employee laws, you know.
Yep.
And so, either way, it's those were the two biggest hurdles to jump over for sure. Coming from nothing to becoming something, and then becoming responsible for other people. It was absolutely they were difficult tasks, but obviously we're still here. So,
So, I guess in regard and back referencing kind of the hurdles that you faced the first couple of years and overcoming them as we kind of mature more in the business and the leadership position you're in. I mean, what I did before this, there's a very tangible and real motivation and desire to provide a service for somebody because you're directly impacting their well-being, which is usually a fairly quick transition you can start to see in somebody. But one of the challenges that I had when I got into the roofing industry was like it's not sexy, right? It's it's the I guess you could say the sale or the transaction of what I was doing before of taking somebody from a position of not very good health to optimal health, and or taking somebody who was in a very poor position financially in business and helping them restructure their company to create financial health for them and their family. Very rewarding, right? So there's got to be more, than just slapping on roofs because of hailstorms out here. But, like what maybe about this industry or specific to this company even excites you or motivates you to get up in the morning?
Sure. Well, you're right about the fitness industry. It's the sale in the fitness industry, from my experience. What's interesting about it is you're not selling, you're selling an idea, and it's an idea that you can be a better person every single day, right? And so that's motivating just saying it out loud. So it's intrinsically a motivating place. People are there to get better. They're positive. They got endorphins running through them, so they're usually smiling. I don't know many people. I mean, what's that, the Legally Blonde quote? People with high endorphins don't murder each other or whatever, But that was really motivating in that world. Now, it was a difficult transition into construction. A lot of it because of how new I was to the industry. I didn't understand a lot about what was going on. I really had to lean on my partner to understand construction in general. I understood the people, and I understood what people wanted. But I didn't understand construction. But the further and further that I get into it, the more and more passion I get from it. So I'll be the first to tell you that I don't drive around, looking at roofs just like, wow, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I mean, most roofs look pretty similar, right? But what really changed the game for me in caring about what we do, specifically, was when I understood how valuable it was. Right. At the time I started the business, or we started the business, neither of us were homeowners, and so we weren't thinking about it in that perspective. But as a homeowner, your home is your most valued asset. It's your biggest expense and investment. I mean, I don't say it's an investment because it's appreciating, but it costs you a lot of money. You have to dedicate your time and energy and attention to pay for it. And its intrinsic value is it protects you and your family, right? It houses you. It houses your family members. It keeps you warm. It keeps you comfortable. It has your memories inside of it. And so what's really driven me in the service mentality we have for business is let us protect you. Let us provide you with something that keeps you safe and secure, and just kind of allows you to make those memories, right? So I started to understand that a little bit more. And like I said, I've been earlier in this interview, I talked about how I sit as a head coach a lot of the time, and there's a lot of people who I'll be the first to say it. I said it. I felt like an imposter sitting in the position that I'm in. I have to find people to fill in those gaps. But as I found people to fill in those gaps, we've got people who have been in construction for their whole lives who work here, and it's just absolutely astonishing understanding every little nitty-gritty detail that goes into building anything. right? It's stuff that we all take for granted out in the civilian world. We just live there and we pay for it. Whereas these people who built it are just absolutely like it's like they're a savant or they're just a master, and they look at something and they can see it from its inside out. Like I mentioned, I know a lot about cellular biology. I could tell you how an organism moves better than most people can. These people literally look at this like it's an organism, and they know how it's built, they know its fundamentals, they know its basics, they know how it's hold together. So I've really gotten entrenched into that, and it's made me want to become as much of a professional there as I possibly can. So, for another long-winded explanation, what motivates me, like I said, is the security that we offer to people, the value we add to their big investment, and also on top of that is I have a keen sense of respect for the industry, and I want to make sure it's known how valuable what we're giving to people is, and that's where the communication experience I have comes into play.
Right. So there's a couple, I guess you could say there's a couple things that we like to hammer into people's mind here, a couple statements and or sayings that we say, but, I guess, is there anything that you take very personally about this company and the reputation and how to keep building that reputation and, providing a very high-end quality service, ethically, transparently with homeowners, not, doing things behind the scenes, eating deductibles or writing deductibles into other parts of claims and then reimbursing deductibles, right?
Yeah, people get pretty crafty.
Yeah, so anything for the dollar, right? So, what separates this company's morals and ethics to other companies?
Well, I hope I can perfectly put this because I came up with about 12 things as you were talking. But one of the mottos that we use all the time here is build every roof as though it's for your mother, right? And that's a really powerful statement. Both Chris and I, when we built the business, we have we have experiences that are very similar when it comes to our upbringing and our mothers and the role that they played. So, sorry to those of you that have a friction-filled relationship with your mother, or that she wasn't around, or whatever it is. That's awful. But for us, that statement in and of itself says it's a novel's worth of ideas. My mother she's an absolute godsend. She's like an angel. She probably does things wrong, I'm sure, but I don't see them. It's like I think that she's just a perfect being, and I want to give back. So if I'm building the roof as though it's for my mother, I'm going to do it well.
Right.
I don't even know why this one's getting me all teary-eyed. I figured this would come later. So that's a big deal around here, is putting absolute integrity and quality into what we do. And that one hits home for me, and that's why it stayed fundamental for the organization. In terms of ethics and transparency and those types of things. Now, one thing I learned really quick into the industry, because I didn't start immediately just opening a business. Chris and I worked together for quite some time as a sales team for other contractors. And what we had learned through the time that we worked for these other people is this industry is notorious for having just some shisty people. You mentioned like the deductible stuff, and I could talk for hours about the different types of fraud and different types of just backwards shisty stuff that a lot of our competitors unfortunately still do. And I learned a lot of that through them, unfortunately. And what really, really kind of pushed us off the cliff to start the business was when we found out just the level of morals that the people we were working for had. And so when I talked to Chris, and it had always been an idea in our mind that we'd build something together, but it wasn't until that point where we found all this stuff out that it became a must. I didn't want my name attached to anything that was happening. I want to be able to sleep at night, for one thing, but I don't want people or anybody to ever misconstrue my character, something I put my name on, as something to be of that low level of business, right? And so one of the things that I said to Chris when we first started is as long as our morals and our goals are always in line, I'm in 100%. I'm focused. I'm ready to go. The second that ever doesn't jive or it's not in line, I'm out. And so that's always stayed a foundational piece. So Pride Roofing and Construction is built off of that concept. It's let's start a new trend in the fitness or in the fitness in the construction or restoration construction industry. Let's set a new principle and let's be so freaking good at it that everybody has to level up their game, right? And so it's to every nut and bolt. I could tell you. I mean, I couldn't tell you all of them. I mean, that's the point. There's so many times that we could have cut a corner, or we could have done something wonky with how we were communicating with insurance that would have benefited us financially. But every single time we chose to take the high road on it. Making more money always sounds good, but at what cost?
Right.
So it's always a temptation. It's always a thing, but it's stayed fundamentally just a principle that is it's unwavering. It's rigid, right? So I can tell, the viewers and anybody who ever crosses paths with them, what you can rest assured with Pride Roofing and Construction is we're going to do two things. We're going to care about your product, your project. We're going to care that it works out. Now, have we done everything perfectly in terms of quality or the experience that the person got? No. I can tell you, we screw stuff up all the time. We're humans, right? But we always come accountable. We always make it right, and we always fix our problems as they come, and then we utilize that information as a training opportunity and inculcate the new learning or incept the new learning or whatever the term is, and put that into the operational protocol of the organization, so it becomes a foundational principle to never actually make the error again, right? So we're always growing, always evolving. So transparency, ethics, honest communication, being accountable to any errors that we make, that's something that you'll always get with Pride Roofing and Construction as long as I'm part of it.
Yeah, so it's the contracting and roofing world, due to the massive growth of insurance restoration sales in the early 2000s and into the early 2010s, came with, unfortunately, a much higher volume of shisty work than honest and ethical work.
Yeah. Well, you think about it. It's like traditionally the trades. People who go into the trades because they're good with their hands. They're not necessarily the greatest communicators. They're not. They're good with this niche thing that they do, and so like the sale originally for everything in the trades world or in the construction world generally is like, I have something that you don't have. I have a solution to your problem. Do you want it or do you not want it? And he went about it that far.
Right.
So that's where our salesmanship and our communication has elevated things. And then you look at insurance restoration, we're talking about in the 2010s. I mean, this has been happening since the 80s, but it really took fire, in that decade of time. It became very widely known that insurance is going to pay more money than you would be able to get doing this work retail, right? And that brought every shiesty mofo out of every nook and cranny that the earth had to offer, right? And so you're dealing with this trade that the common person has no idea how to do. So you already know you're housing something that's of the value to these people, and then you put another greedy layer on top of that, and that's a big fight that we have to battle all the time.
Right.
Right.
So where do you see trends of where the industry's heading?
Well, I know that it has evolved immensely since I first got into it. There are more checks and balances systems within the insurance companies. That's actually probably the biggest hurdle that the community of people who do anything that has to do with insurance restoration work have to get past, is that the insurance companies are realizing how many competitors are absorbing these dollars and how much money that they're losing. So there's all kinds of new things that are changing with their deductibles, with the types of insurance policies that are there, percentage rates that they're increasing to. That's going to be the biggest hurdle for people who don't have a good head for business, and they got into it for specifically those fast dollar transactions, for sure.
So one of the trends that I've been seeing kind of migrating from east to west is the change in deductible values, the change in how they insure, the change in policy language, that, paying attention to things in this industry and people that have been in this industry for 20, 30, 40 years are starting to see it almost seems as if insurance companies are making the restoration process more expensive for the homeowner, right? Which inherently will diminish the amount of claims called in, right? To protect their pockets, which is a little disheartening. Looking at homeowners insurance in the United States holds a like $170 billion market share, which is probably enough money to re-roof the entire nation once or twice.
Probably a few times. Billion with a B.
Yeah, with a B. So I know that there's been a lot of changes in the last year, which could come from many things, but I know that it's a bit of a bummer because, most insurance companies are protected federally, right? So they won't really ever go bankrupt. But the big fish, meaning those guys, want to protect their pockets as much as possible and minimize or maybe maximize the amount of bankruptcy that goes on in some of the smaller contractors' pockets. We'll see. But
yeah, it's disheartening, or I don't know what the right term is for it, but it's not as much of a hurdle in my mind as it will be for people who don't have their shit together.
Yeah. So if we look ahead, outside of monetary things, what are the long-term goals for you for this company? Where do you see it going? What do you want to see happen? What are your 5, 10-year, 20-year retirement plans?
Well,
maybe what are those plans in correlation to what you thought was possible when it started?
What I thought was possible when we started was I have found a way to work for myself and be able to pay my bills.
Right.
But it truly has evolved. If I were to look at our company on a 5, 10, 20-year projection, the goal is to not... I want to develop the organization into more of a commercial retail company than it is a insurance restoration residential company, right? So there's a lot of stepping stones to getting there. However, when I say I don't think that it's as much of a hurdle to get past that for us as it will be for other people who have their stuff in line, is because we're making action steps daily to evolve every area of our business to be able to grab into newer markets, namely getting into the commercial retail world. If you know anything about commercial properties and about materials that are used, a flat roof has usually rubber on top of it, right? There's different types of it, but there's rubber on top of it. That's what commercial buildings have. Hail doesn't damage rubber, and it only damages it if it's a poor quality product, and it's
right.
already, you're assuming that. So this is something that is a year-round, no seasonality to it. There's consistency, and you have feeders. That's what we're growing right now. The feeder referral areas is the partnerships that we're developing across the board with property managers, HOAs, insurance agents, but that's aside from this particular concept, general contractors, so on and so forth. So we're developing a brand that can actually predict its future revenue, regardless of whether there's a storm or not a storm. And so in a 10-year forecast, we have that business that I'm kind of, painting the picture for
Right.
Right. In 20 years, I'd like it to be something where I can pass it to my son.
Or Gabe.
And daughter. Yeah, good old Gabe. But it's like my motivation in doing all the things that I do is because I want to be able to give something of value to the progeny that I have and my family.
So you'd say the purpose that I hear, the undertone of that purpose is legacy.
Legacy, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So the foundations, I was fortunate enough to take a lot of business classes, entrepreneurial type classes, mentorships, et cetera, with one of my previous employers. And one of the guys that we had, he said, there's two reasons you start a company, to sell it or to hand it off. At the end of the day, those are the only two reasons you start a company, is to sell it or pass it down. And usually you pass it down to a family member, right? Most commonly. And he said the two purposes of those businesses are polarizingly opposite, right? One is to generate the highest amount of sellable value, and one is to generate the longest amount of tenure and legacy, right? So it's impossible to build or develop a company that is based on legacy principles without a very firm foundation of ethics and morals. So, I mean, I think that, I know quite a few people that start companies to sell companies, and that's their child, right? They look at that as their baby, right? Is to take a company from, 3 million to 25 million and then cash out, right? And then leave a nest egg for, well, most of the people that I know that do that don't have kids, but maybe they're dogs, who knows? But I think that knowing that that's the goal, right, speaks volumes to the people that work here, knowing that the end goal is for this to stay within the same family, right? And in turn, probably generate and have a hand in developing hundreds of other families, right? So in 20 years, what will Gabe be, 26?
25.
25? So
I might not be able to actually give it to him if he's anything like I was at 25. So go into, just because I think this is important, and I think this is one thing that separates Pride from a lot of other companies. What do we do, or how do we impact the local community, and what types of ways do we give back other than writing a check to a charity and then getting a picture with it saying, hey, check it out, we gave you guys tons of money, so give us some clout, right? Which I think, in my opinion, is the antithesis of what giving back is. But it's almost like those YouTube videos of people filming themselves giving hobos money.
Right.
It's like, why?
Right.
Do it if you want to do it.
Yeah, but we don't need to film
about it.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of things that we've done to give back. We have standard give back programs. So we have one that's that's called Pride Gives Back, where for every 100 roofs that we build, we donate one to a veteran, frontline healthcare worker, or first responder. This one, actually, the reason we started this one was kind of our own personal pushback during the defund the police movement. The George Floyd thing that was going on and all that stuff, where people all of a sudden were against the protectors of the United States, or the people who, save us if we're in trouble, And so, as asinine as all that sounded to us, we decided we needed to do something different about it. So there's a little place on our website where you can go and you can enter names for somebody who's a veteran, a frontline healthcare worker, first responder. We'll make exceptions to certain things like that depending on the character of the person that's being recommended. But generally, it's somebody that's just in a bind, right? They spent their entire life giving to their community, and now they're in a position where insurance is not going to pay for it. They have no money. There's water leaking in on their head if it's a roof thing or whatever. and we're just going to say, hey, thank you,
Right.
with this give back program. We've done other donations as well. We work with the Habitat for Humanity on a couple different projects. That one was one of the most fun projects, or at least just like warm-hearted feeling projects that we had. In my opinion, was we put roofs on these new construction builds for free. It was on us. We went out and gave the material and the labor. It was a couple of houses. I can't remember if it was 3 or 4, but we re-roofed 3 or 4 houses that were built to house domestic violence survivors, right? So it's these women with their children that have no place to go because of a really poor scenario that they find themselves in. And so we did what I was talking about before, and we gave them protection, at least from the top. We weren't doing the siding and that kind of stuff, but that felt good. That was a good one. We've also donated. I've made some personal donations. I elected our company to pay for this one was really, really fun for me. We put the roof on the youth facility for the church that I attend, and that one was really special for me. I mentioned to you guys that my mom is like an angel, right? And that one struck a chord for me when I realized what position that they were in and the fact that they could not pay for this, because this youth facility, my mother was a youth leader. She spent a long time volunteering herself. She never got paid for it, but it was a full-time job. Working as a youth leader. I can't remember if she was on payroll. There was a lot that she did that she didn't get paid for. She's a surface-minded human. But anyways, it was she worked as a youth leader for a church that I grew up in, and I remember very vividly some of the experiences that I got to take part in. The youth facility at this particular church, she would do free meals for kids, and she would do all kinds of events, and this house remained open basically any hour up until about 10 p.m. And so these kids from the community, generally ones from really poor backgrounds, would come and hang out at this house because they knew it was a safe place for them to be.
Right.
So it was really special for me to be a part of all that, because I got to witness, we fed them, we housed them as much as we could, we did all these things, and then in turn, the only thing that we asked of them is that they listen to the word, right? That they listen, and we preach some good things into their heart, right? And I witnessed some lives change inside that building. So when I found out the youth facility was in that position, I needed to do something about it. I had a real I was called, I don't know, say called, or I just knew that I needed to do that. So we donated that roof, which is the most expensive donation that we've done to date. But I wouldn't take it back.
Yeah.
Ever. It was very valuable. We've worked with the Boys and Girls Club. We've done donations for multiple different charities. We've supported school events. We've been sponsors for a lot of different things. Some things we have taken pictures on, is kind of suggested that we take pictures on, but honestly, I like to do the majority of this stuff in the background. It only makes sense to me. I grew up, like I mentioned, my parents split. There was a time where we basically were homeless. I had to move into my grandma's basement. I lived with 9 women, in this basement of my grandma's house. And it's important to me that I never forget where I came from. And I take some of the success and take some of that, whatever it is that you call it, that we're earning right now, and we invest that right back into the people that were in a position that I was in, or a position that a lot of people that I know are in.
Right.
So there's always something that we're doing to give back. We've done it goes further than that. There's a lot of employees here. There's a lot now. There have been a number over our tenure. We've done a lot of different, loans, no interest loans that went out to these people, and I've never asked for people to pay them back if they couldn't pay them back.
Right.
And it's just like, you're investing into me. Why in the heck would I not invest into you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, a little bit of personal interest as well as just a general question. But what would you have done differently, if anything, reflecting in the last 5 years? And then second question to that, which I'll remind you if you want me to, but what would you tell yourself 5 years ago if you were in the position you are today, talking to yourself 5 years ago?
Well, as far as what would I do differently,
Yeah.
I probably would have spent more time. Well, two things. I would have spent more time as just me and Chris operating the organization without onboarding anybody. I mentioned that, year two, we started to take on immense amount of overhead, and that put its pressures on. I would have wanted to build a much larger safety net prior to getting involved with the overhead burden, right? I guess I haven't mentioned it on this video, but when we first started this company, we didn't have any investors.
Right.
We sought out investors. We asked for loans from friends. We advocated, and regardless of our salesmanship, we got $0 out of anybody, right? And so
It's pretty normal.
yeah, and so we had to build this with the very small amount of savings that we had between the two of us, and everything was built out of a very small sum, and we door knocked our way, bootstrapped our way, whatever you want to call it, into success. We forced it. That American dream conversation is like we forced a very round peg into a very small square hole. And so I would have very much liked to have spent more time developing the ways we do certain things within the business and building a much larger safety net prior to bringing on people. And the reason I say that that's one of the things I would do differently is because I can tell you, I'll save it on this video, but there's some very significant experiences that I can remember that caused extreme burden in my household because of the financial stress that we caused ourselves, right? I remember a very vivid moment where I spent every dime I had in savings to pay a commission to a salesperson just so that person wouldn't leave, right? My entire savings to sell to pay their one commission, I went broke as they got some money just so I could keep them on my team, and that happened multiple times. But there was one very significant time that sort of happened at the worst time. It was during the Christmas time.
Perfect.
It's perfect. I had $0 to buy my kids or my spouse or my family presents, and I didn't know how we were ever going to manage to get further than that. And I thought that I just gave away my little nest egg that I had when this thing was going to collapse on ourselves. And and there's more to that financial burden. But that's one thing I would have changed, absolutely. Maybe a year, maybe 2 years, but it would have been very nice to have secured a nest egg.
Yeah.
On top of that,
do you think that you would have had the same level of conviction to drive with that nest egg?
That's a good question. A mentor told me one time that if somebody responds with, "That's a good question," you ask a good question. How do you know the question is a good question?
I just know that, I grew up very poor. So I know that some of the lessons I've learned with money as I've gotten older is that I'm a firm believer, because when I started my first gym, I wrote myself, and this comes from a Tony Robbins book, but I wrote myself $1 million check to myself, and I future dated it, right? With the hopes and aspirations that I would be able to write myself $1 million check, right? And I think it was 7.5 years or something from that point which still undercut my future date on my check because I wrote 10 years. But I got to the place where that would be feasible, and I was more miserable than I ever was. Right. So I'm a firm believer that money doesn't buy or correlate to happiness. I do think that it opens up drastically more opportunities.
Right.
And some of those opportunities can provide you happiness or continued success. But I don't think that money provides that level of happiness or safety. But I do know that I have an inherent weakness of looking at money out versus money in. And I know that for me, if I can just think about money in and I don't have to think about money out, then I'm substantially more successful. And I also know that the lower my bank account is, the harder I work.
You and everybody else. Yeah. Man. Well, I can tell you, I've never in my life been a complacent person.
Right.
I have always had just a weird. If I've chosen to do something, I will do it, and I'll do it to the best of my ability. That's kind of one of my two superpowers. I'd call it.
What's your other one?
My other superpower
is it that you're a ginger and you don't have a soul?
Gingers have souls. Yeah. No, my other superpower is my ability to read and understand what people are saying without them saying words. And it's a product probably of my upbringing and the home that I was in. Parents fighting and all that kind of stuff. But I can read the room very well. But I've never been a complacent person. However, there is something about you primal that kind of comes out when you need to get something done.
Right.
And it's maybe not everybody has it, or they haven't. It's very deep down inside of them. But I would say maybe we wouldn't have been as successful as fast if there had been a nest egg. We might have taken more delays and that type of stuff. I firmly think we would have gotten somewhere. Maybe it would have been a different way,
right.
But, yeah, I mean, you have nothing. I mean, think about it. I guess I didn't talk about this because we haven't talked about the personal motivation topic yet, but I quit my career in the fitness world at the pestering of my ex-business partner when 3 months after my child was born, my first child.
Right.
Well, sorry. It's like they say when a child is born, something changes.
It does.
And you can feel it. Right? It's like when you're young. Sorry, I don't know why the hell I'm crying here.
You're talking about your kid, man. It's normal.
It's like when you're young, you feel like you have the world at your fingertips. You feel like you can do anything. You're absolutely resilient to the world. Nothing will get you down. Blah, 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 blah. You're invincible. The second your kid's born, you realize that you are no longer working for yourself or living for yourself is a better way to put it. It's like I have something that wholeheartedly depends on me, so I better not screw this up.
Right.
So I don't know what I was thinking, jumping ship like that, I guess. 3 months into having a kid. Maybe that's the thing that I probably should say is the thing I do differently. I don't know. But I can firmly tell you that there was some fight in me.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I took, not right when my daughter was born, but, she was 4. And, I closed my business and left an industry that I only knew behind and gave myself the ability to take basically a year off of work, which happened to coexist with COVID, which was nice because everybody else was taking off time from work too. But, when the time came and I gave myself a year and I inherently got tremendously bored at about 5 months, right? I
can imagine.
And I traveled to 6-7 different lakes, and I was fishing with my daughter, taking her around the country. You can only fish so much before you're like, man, I got to do something to feed this fishing habit, and or I'm getting bored, right? So, but I kind of jumped off like, whoa. What the hell should I do? Like, I don't, walking into a new industry, having literally zero knowledge of anything, would be much less risky without my daughter. Mm-hmm. Right? It would be, in fact, I probably would enjoy some of the risk.
Yeah.
But it puts a pretty firm button on that risk button when you've got a kid that's like, well, I'm hungry, right? Yeah. Or I want, you get to the place where you're like, the worries are not about me. Mm-hmm. It's like, am I putting myself in a position where I can buy this kid a winter coat, mm-hmm. right? Because I don't need a winter coat, right? I'll just wear 3 shirts and 2 sweatshirts, right? But she does, mm-hmm. So the risk is I get it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that pressure, I'm a firm believer that pressure is almost the strongest motivator for success.
It is. I mean, it's 100%. There's a lot of quotes and cliche stuff around mm-hmm. pressure, but it's like it does one of 2 things. It either forms you or it breaks you.
Right. Yeah, and it's I used to practice this thing mm-hmm. when I owned my businesses before this, where I would intentionally pay myself the same as my lowest paid employee. Mm-hmm. And that's the money I'd hold in my bank account, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And I would hold all the other, money elsewhere in other bank accounts that I very purposely didn't view very frequently. Mm-hmm. And because the way that I was brought up, I wasn't used to having a few extra $1,000 in the account, mm-hmm. or, I always had to scrap to find money to pay bills, scrap to find money to pay for food, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So I almost created that pressure mm-hmm. for myself mm-hmm. because that's how I know how to succeed. Right. Right. And then throw a kid in there and it's like 10x. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but it's, I think that's, I don't know if I would look at that as a mistake or as some kind of divine intervention.
I think it was divine intervention. Yeah. I refer to that a lot. Gabe has no idea what I'm talking about. Right. But I'll have these conversations with him because sometimes he'll need me to sleep with him in his bed at night because he's only 5. He's still, right. And I'm
There's scary shit under the bed, man.
Very much an enabler. I'm like, yes, I will definitely do this until I can't fit in your bed anymore. But we'll talk about that sometimes. And his name's Gabriel, which after Angel Gabriel. Yep. But I'll tell him you've saved my life more than once, buddy.
Right. And he's probably like, cool, Dad.
you want to talk about the octopus on my ceiling? Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, it's a motivator. Absolutely. I don't think I would want to change that specifically, the timeline. No. I think it was the right thing to do. Looking back,
it's probably exactly what you needed to do.
It was. I wasn't getting complacent in the gym industry. I was getting motivation is so fleeting. It's not really. My passion was gone mm-hmm. in that industry. It was like I was giving everything I could to something I was never going to get any further in.
Yeah. So, I mean, reading between the lines here, mm-hmm. based on our previous conversation, previous questions that I've asked, I think that I could probably, and please interject or correct me if I'm wrong, but I could probably sum up that the motivator and or passion for what you do now, mm-hmm. as I said previously, that roofs are not that sexy of an item to sell, right, is more so about the impact of people.
Absolutely. You're reading correctly between the lines.
In reference to the people that work for you as well as the people that you're impacting outside of here as customers.
My upbringing was a little rough, like we talked about, similar to yours. Very different. I grew up in Albuquerque. Yeah. But either way, it's hot out there in the street. Just kidding. But I want that legacy piece of it. I want I want my kids to learn how to earn. I want them to understand the value of a dollar, but I do not want them to have to struggle the same way. It's like,
Right.
I'm gonna give you a struggle that I get to control,
Right.
but not the one that I had to endure.
Right.
You know, the legacy part. I want to teach my kids that if you set your mind to something, you can do anything. You know, I want to teach them the value of hard work and dedication and energy, the value of showing up, and the freedom that comes with discipline. You know, one of the things that I'm most passionate about, honestly, working in the company, is the engagement and the growth and the subsequent growth from the engagement with the employees. So I mentioned I love working with clients, but clients, as much as you work this account and you don't make it transactional, that it still has a expiration date. You know, eventually, you know, you two have served each other's purpose. You know, you'll refer each other, but it's over. It's a lot of pride that I get out of it, you know, pun intended, I guess, with the name, and it's a lot of it makes you feel like you're in the right place, you know, like you fit, like you're doing something that you're supposed to be doing, when you get to watch the people around you excel. And you had an impact on that, whether it was something you taught them or a barrier helped them cross or whatever it was. It's like, it makes me feel good to help people become a better professional in any way that it can. And it's also very motivating to know that I've created something that's the source for how they get through life, right? You know, not for everybody money is their motivator, but it's a necessity. It's an unfortunate necessity for everybody. It's fuel to life, right? And if I could provide a mechanism or a machine that helps them through life, it makes me feel good, you know? So it's, yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, I can share from personal experience that there's been some interesting times that we've shared through this company, put it that way. But in, you know, the in those circumstances in which there's been some difficulties or hard times just overall, there's been multiple times that I've directly felt self-admission or personal growth or, you know, barriers that I had to break through myself in the, I guess you could say, comfort of being able to be vulnerable enough, specifically with you in certain circumstances where I wasn't with people before. And, you know, being as, you know, somebody that's in a position of leadership, you know, whether it's unbeknownst to you or not, you provide that level of security and or compassion and empathy and care for the people around you to open up those avenues, which is, to me, that's what leadership is, right? Is, you know, being able to have a conversation with somebody and be like, what's really going on? What's really going on, right? Yeah. So, so what piece of advice would you give to a carbon copy of you who's in this same position right now, wanting to, you know, jet set, start their business, but feel like they have no fucking clue what they're doing?
Yeah.
Roofing industry or not, you know, for me,
I'd say remove the thought that you're ever going to think that you know how to do it right. Right. You're, I can promise you, even sitting here, understanding the financial, the metrics and the systems and the so-called successes, I can tell you every single day I feel like I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Which is usually a good indicator of somebody that's successful.
Right, I don't feel like it's ever going to go away. I don't think if we ever transition to become $100 million contractor that it's ever going to go away, because like I mentioned before, every year it's new level, new devil, new year, whatever you want to call it. There are new things that you have no idea are coming at you, and unfortunately, you are your sound wall, right? Like you can depend on the people around you, but at the same time, the decisions are going to have to come from whatever instinct that you have. And sometimes it's going to be wrong. Let's do it. Maybe the other piece of information I'd give is if you haven't started, the only caution I give to you is make sure that you know whether you have grit factor or not. Sometimes it fucking sucks. And we can take that piece out. Sometimes it really sucks.
Yeah.
There are times that it's just like you question everything in your life.
Yep.
And you question, why in the hell would I ever have elected to do this? And the thing about being an entrepreneur that you don't understand until you're there is that you don't get to reverse it and just shut it down and get rid of it. There are so many entanglements that you have to untangle before you could get out of it. So make sure it's what you want to do, but don't sit there thinking about it too long. If you know you have grit and you've gotten rid of the idea that you're ever actually going to think you know how to do it the right way, jump off a cliff.
Right.
What's the worst that could happen, right? That was one of the things my mentor, Nolan, that I mentioned to you, is like when I was learning how to become a manager the first time, he put me into a general manager role of a company where I had 25 employees and we had 4,000 gym goers and so on and so forth. And I was like, I've never done this before. Like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And he kept getting really irritated with me because I wouldn't make decisions. And the advice that he gave me was, he's like, Christian, are you a heart surgeon? And I was like, what does that have to do with anything? No, I'm like, you're a wild dude, And he goes, Christian, answer the question, are you a heart surgeon? And I was like, no. And he goes, so if you make a mistake, will anybody's heart blow up? And I was like, no. And he's like, okay, good. Then go make a decision. If you fail, their heart's not going to blow up, so you could probably fix it. So go fix it.
Yeah.
And then learn from it,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, so that's the thing. It's like you don't have to question whether you have the ability or you don't have the ability. What you have to question is, do I have the grit to make it through the hard times?
Yeah, I always like to say, write out your fears, right? And if your fears outweigh the benefits, which if you really inventory the benefits, like everything, personal freedom, autonomy of schedule, things that have nothing to do with money, right? If your fears really outweigh the benefits, maybe don't, right? But usually it's a couple fears. It's like, I'll fail, which is really just fear, or I don't think I know enough or I'm good enough to do this.
Well, when you're doing that inventory and your fears outweigh, the pros to it, it has to. You got to go back and rework your internal wiring.
Right.
You're worried about way too much stuff.
Right.
Entrepreneurialism, owning a business, it can be learned, and it can be learned by anybody.
Right.
Right. All it really, it sounds cliche, but it boils down to that: do you have a grit factor? If it comes to it, and there's pressure on you, will you break or will you not break?
Right.
And if you're not going to break because you're obsessed, do it.
Right. It's like it's like the old adage of, do you want to succeed as much as you have a desire to breathe?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. So this is a little bit of maybe a deeper question. It might require a little bit of thought, but to your customers and or employees, I'm gonna exclude family on this just because I want to keep it a little more business centric. But when they hear your name, what do you want them to think?
My employees and my clients.
Yeah, either both or one or the other. Alex used to teach me that the best judge of character in a leader is what somebody says after they leave your business, right?
If I were to summarize it to a word, I'd want to say genuine. Genuine. Put some guts into that conversation. I don't want to fake it. I don't want when I leave a room from having a conversation with an employee, I want them to know that was my true feelings and that was me as a person, not acting. I want them to know I truly cared and I invested that time because I wanted to see them grow. I didn't do it for my betterment. I did it because I cared about this scenario, right? It's genuine, right? When I'm working with a client, I want them to know that when I promise the service and when I am passionate about what I'm trying to offer to them, I want them to know that it was genuine. It wasn't fabricated, right? It comes from a very experienced perspective. It comes from, I've seen us do it wrong. I've seen us fix it. I have felt the experiences. I know exactly what I'm getting into when I'm getting into it. And I genuinely want to help you, right? The other, I guess, would be if I could hope, it's that they always just understand that I was a good leader.
I think those are good. Genuinity and good, sound, ethical leadership. So, well, that'll wrap us for today. If you guys stuck around and watched the whole interview on this, I want to thank you for your attention and time on that. And we're going to dive into more specifically subjected conversations like this in the future. So we hope that you guys can tune in and comment, share it. Should even comment negatively if you want to. But we'd love to hear your feedback. We just, taking this time so that you guys can get to know the company better, as well as the owner of the company, who's, trickling down the ethics and morals and values that we want to, our employees to represent when they're out in the field with you. So we appreciate your time and see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Ryan.